But it bothers me so many times. I hear my clients who are male say, you know, I can't get my kid, she won't let me get my kid, and the children are absolutely missing out. And it's all about money, right? Whoever has the money to go to court. The reality is family law is a business, and that's the horrible part of it, because it's...
What I thought was a situation, an event of domestic violence on the part of my dad my whole life was actually contrived by my mom and her lawyer. That's right. My mom's lawyer advised her to get a bogus restraining order to set up a situation where my dad would be enraged, make claims of abuse to get a domestic violence charge so that she could get more money and custody.
For the first time ever in their marriage, in their relationship, when they have kids, out comes allegations of child abuse, neglect, drug, alcohol use, domestic violence allegations out of nowhere. You know, is it prevalent in your experience and kind of out there in California that you see that this happens a lot involving custody issues?
You know, Scott, it's really not uncommon at all.
Here in Harris County, we have a dedicated court specifically for family violence or protective orders. So one of the tricks that a lot of attorneys are using now is to file a protective order along with their petition for divorce. Well, what happens is these protective orders get clogged up in the system. I recently had a case where a protective order was filed in October of last year, but was not heard until August of this year. So my client essentially went 10 months without being able to see his child. What happens is when you file these protective orders, the court will set what's called an ex parte protective order, which will eliminate any access with the child. And these ex parte orders are granted without any hearings and without any notice to the other party. So if somebody, again, is willing to go in and exaggerate a circumstance, the court will grant this ex parte order, which will effectively eliminate any contact with the child. Yeah. And it's a very unfortunate situation that's happening here in Houston and Harris County, and I'm sure that it's happening everywhere, but this is one of those tricks that parents are using to eliminate and prevent access. Mm-hmm.
This county attorney is under fire for making statements during a presentation to private attorneys that seem to lean towards a fraudulent use of the domestic violence injunction. The county attorney, her name is Leslie Levi out of Williamson County, Texas. I'll give you a chance to take a look at that, and then we'll bring Tasha Simmons in to discuss it.
Seems like most of y'all have enough basis to know that a protective order carries criminal consequences. Accordingly, that makes it a pretty heavy tool in negotiating a divorce. So I would encourage you very strongly, if you have one of those cases, to do the protective order as part of your case. It gives you more leverage in negotiating settlement. Well, then you've got something that carries criminal consequences that you can use to get a protective order or use as a bargaining chip in your divorce. Because not only does a protective order carry criminal consequences if you violate it, it also comes up on criminal background checks, and it also means you have to surrender your firearms.
Are there any punishments for filing for false testimony for protection orders?
Not that I know of. I think you can probably file for attorney's fees.
Cupcakes. Fox 26's Randy Wallace reporting tonight from the courthouse downtown.
Just about anyone who's married or has kids could one day end up in family court. According to testimony against 280th District Court Judge Barbara Stalder, if you're accused of domestic violence, you won't get a fair shake.
You think that she is biased against people that are accused of committing domestic violence?
Absolutely. She campaigned as being a victim of family violence.
According to testimony in her recusal hearing, 280th District Court Judge Barbara Stalder is, quote, the abused becoming the abuser.
It is very concerning. It should be concerning to every resident of Harris County that we have this situation in the 280th.
Four attorneys testified Judge Stalder has an extreme bias against anyone accused of family violence.
This person may not have committed any family violence. The applicant may be completely lying.
She kicked me out of the hearing and my client out of the hearing on the Zoom, but still took evidence from the government.
Well, my daughter's asking me, Daddy, why can't I come stay at your house? I'm not gonna lie to you. I love you.
Charles Batla is not allowed to be alone with his own little girl. It's been this way for 10 long months.
At this point, I don't really have much faith left in the justice system, so it's just another letdown.
The little girl can't play with her stepsisters or even be with her grandma. Charles even has to pay a court-approved visitation supervisor $200 a day just to spend a few hours of father time every other weekend.
They're draining us, taking all our money. I mean, barely making bills.
This is what happens when a father is accused of molesting his own child. That's what's happened to Charles Batla, and that's why he came to Dolcefino Consulting.
You can't even prove yourself innocent. So where do you go from there? You're guilty until you're just guilty.
But when an out-of-control judge gets involved in these already nasty cases, it goes from sad to another case of family injustice. In a courtroom we've visited before.
Barbara Stalder needs to be removed. Reparations need to be made for the families. A public apology needs to be made. And this needs to never happen again.
This was an incredibly joyous moment for Taha Salahuddin. He hadn't seen his two young sons for nearly 2 years, and not because he didn't want to. His ex-wife was the reason why. She had simply refused to let 7-year-old Omar and 5-year-old Zaid see their dad because she claimed he was sexually abusing them. Multiple investigations have proven that wasn't true. These fake rape allegations are part of a bitter 4-year-long custody battle that brings us our latest case of family injustice.
My dad would go to hug me and I would reject him. And I confronted him every chance I got to scream and yell at him about why he was a bad person, why his culture was so bad, and rejecting everything that made him him. When I was at his house, when he would manage to get visitation, I would go through his papers. I knew what I needed to do when I was around his information, and that was to steal it and give it to my mom so she could get him fired and this and that. And that's what she would do. She would call these companies and make accusations pertaining to his national origin. That's one of the hardest things, because there was a lot of abuse in my house growing up with my mom, and those scars are there, but the scars of guilt are just as powerful. And I can't take it back. I can't get time back. And no matter how many times I tell myself or someone else tells me that there was nothing I could do, that I was going to be powerless to this campaign of denigration, and thinking, I need to tell somebody. And the thought that would always stop me is, who's going to listen? They don't listen to my dad. He's an adult. Who's going to listen to a 10-year-old? And then what's going to happen to me? They're not going to give me to my dad. And I don't even know that I know him anymore. What if some of the stuff my mom says is true? What if I'm wrong? I'm just a kid.
I didn't have the father figure in my life. I didn't know how to be a man.
If he was really present in my life, I would probably, not be chasing boys.
As far as relationships go, I have a lot of trust issues now.
I don't see the point in allowing someone to get close to you if at the end of the day they're just going to hurt you.
I cause a lot of depression, anger.
I just can't call him dad right now because he was never there.
How would the lives of these children have been different if the courts assumed that both parents should be equally involved?
My biggest fear here is that because I sign my rights away, the judge is going to look at this case a little bit differently.
My birth mother alienated me from my birth father for over a decade.
I mean, I'm a father that quote unquote voluntarily relinquished my parental rights, and now I'm trying to get them back.
I think death would be easier than a divorce.
It's very frustrating to have gone for help and then come out with your family destroyed.
We have serious problems in our family law court system.
Getting divorced is far from easy.
Litigation lasted for over a year.
I was married only 4 months, and my divorce has lasted over 6.5 years.
Close to 8 years.
8 years.
Why is divorce so difficult?
People can get as much justice as they can afford. Most people cannot afford any justice at all.
What's wrong with that? This is a business.
The more you charge, the more people are willing to pay.
They didn't give me a lawyer, pay this $11,000 or go to jail. It really got to the end of the line for me.
And I said to the litigants, I want you to know, after 2 hours, we will have spent more than most people in this courthouse make in a year.
Because there are so many incentives to lie in court during a divorce, people often make up false abuse charges. Physical violence and sexual assault are crimes, and our justice system is set up to handle criminal accusations like this. But family courts also listen to and act upon such accusations. And because false accusations are so common during a divorce, these cases are typically not turned over to criminal court. Family court judges have to distinguish between true abuse victims and those crying wolf for financial gain.
One of the biggest problems in family court is there are so many false accusations and so few consequences for those accusations.
How could you be married for 20 years? You were a great husband, she was a great wife. Now we're going through a divorce. He's a pervert, he's a drug dealer, he's doing all these horrible things. She's an alcoholic, she's a drug dealer, and she's sleeping with everybody. Did this just happen in the last week or two?
I got a lot of those that happened right at the top of divorce action when both people were in the house and one person wanted to get the other person out of the house.
It may be that, in fact, there is no violence, but they make it up because they've talked with their friends or they've gone to a lawyer who said, well, make it up, and if you really do a good job, then you can get him kicked out. Now you're in the house. You have a big leg up in keeping the kids and maybe keeping possession of the house.
I've counseled women and a few men on how to get the other side thrown out of the house.
How hard is that to do?
If you follow my instructions, easy.
Domestic violence, first of all, is defined so broadly. There's so many things that can count as domestic violence that it's not hard. It's not hard to be accused of domestic violence.
It's really a travesty the way the system that it was designed to protect women from domestic abuse, to protect children from abuse, to protect children from sexual abuse, a system that was set up with every good intention, that was set up to protect those who needed it, has been allowed to be subverted so that false accusers really are able to gain so much by making the false accusation.
I've never covered an issue that incensed people so much. But then again, almost every parent will say there's nothing worse than losing a child.
If you are going to claim the other parent is abusing your child, there's a chance that it will boomerang against you and you will lose custody. Because what I tell my clients is there's things we know and there's things we can prove. There's a risk anytime you're bringing a protective parent case before the court that you're going to end up losing custody. If not on the first hearing, eventually.
If you make the allegation, and this is such a serious thing to allege, I mean, others and I have called it, like the nuclear weapon of family court, So if you drop that bomb and you can't prove it, it's not like you go back to zero.
I just wasn't going to allow my kids to grow up without their father. You generally hear more about black fathers abandoning and kids having baby daddies, but there are a lot of people that are just like me that want to be with their kids, that a lot of times they're denied. And then when I found out that she made up things and used her brother to say that I was a terrible father, and seeing that people would lie in order to get an advantage, it just infuriated me.
I've been through 43 false allegations as of today in 11 years, over an 11-year period. Not one conviction, not one arrest. When somebody takes your children from you that way, the only way that I can describe it is it's like you're grieving the loss of a living child.
My grandchildren and I were so close. My youngest grandchild took his first steps walking to me. Whenever he'd be in somebody's arms and he'd see me, he'd be like, you see his eyes get big and he'd start to squirm and he'd just get out of the arms and come running to me. I have not seen my grandchildren now for 6 years, and it is a shame what has taken place.
It destroys lives, it bankrupts people every day, it tears children from their homes, and just so happens to be a $50 billion a year industry. Talking about divorce, and it's the subject of a brand new film that's coming out this Friday called Divorce Court. It's narrated by Dr. Drew Pinsky. He's the host of Dr. Drew on Call on our sister network HLN. And this documentary shines a light on the unethical and sometimes corrupt practices that can be seen in family court and cases that drag out for years.